Hey everybody, welcome to RPM, Rock and Pop Mandolin, your site for learning classic rock and pop songs on this wonderful little 8-stringed instrument. My name is Mike DeJong, and this video is another in our series of interviews with mandolin legends. And in this video, we'll talk to the multi-instrumentalist and the Mando Maestro himself, Mike Marshall, whose great career began way back when he was a teenager. That's right, he'll tell us about joining David Grisman's band and recording with the great Stephane Grappelli before the age of 20. And then he'll tell us all about his career after that, the many collaborations he's had along the way, and his Grammy nominations, his forays into classical music and Brazilian as well, and also what he's doing today, collaborating with his mandolin maestro wife, Catarina, who's a virtuoso on classical mandolin in her own right. So Mike will talk all about that. He'll also tell about his lesson series, Artist Works, where he continues to teach young mandolin players how to play this lovely little instrument. All of that's coming up in this interview. But first, if you're new here, please don't hesitate to hit that little subscriber button, that little red tab in the lower right corner of your screen. Also, please check out all the links we have down below. If you're looking for a mandolin tab for rock and roll songs, well, I have tabs for nearly 150 songs on my Patreon page, and you can get that link down below if you're looking for a tab. But that's enough business. Let's get along with this interview with Mike Marshall, the mandolin maestro, multi-instrumentalist here on RPM. Hey, Mike, it's really a pleasure, an honor to have you on the channel. Thanks very much.
Oh, you betcha. It's a pleasure to be here, and I love what you're doing. It's a very cool concept. Rock and pop mandolin, huh?
Well, thanks very much. Yeah, I figure, so many people are doing bluegrass and old time music, and I love all that stuff, or
Sure, sure,
jazz.
sure.
But there wasn't many people doing the rock and pop stuff, so I thought I'd
Yeah,
dive in there and fill a
that's
little
very cool.
niche.
The mandolin has been used, of course, in a few classic hits over the years, and it's often hiding in a track. It's a great thing to put the sparkle on the top of otherwise maybe you have a bunch of rhythm guitars or something. You needed something that goes up high there, even playing the same part. You might not necessarily hear it, but it's got its
Exactly.
play.
Yeah, and for me, I mean, like many people, I came over from guitar, so I
Uh-huh.
knew, I played classic rock songs in the band, so I wanted to start playing mandolin stuff. And when I heard REM's "Losing My Religion," I'm like, "What? Wow, what's that instrument? That's
Yeah,
cool." And then
yeah.
I picked it up from there. So I've kind of
Right.
gone backwards. Now I'm looking at bluegrass and jazz and all of that. You
Oh,
know,
great,
yeah,
great. Well, there's definitely a renaissance for this instrument, and it's spread all over the world, and it's functions well in a lot of styles of music. As you look at my career and the different things I've been involved in. This little mandolin's taken me a lot of places.
well,
uh,
cool. Yeah, we'll definitely talk about that in this interview, Mike. And I just love the fact that you're so versatile. That you, unlike many other people, you play so many instruments. I mean, how many instruments do you play?
Well, it's mostly strings, of course, and they're all so related. I started on guitar, but the teacher I had early on played banjo and mandolin, a little bit of fiddle and bass. And so he kind of introduced me to all of them and took us to jam sessions, and we went to bluegrass festivals. I was growing up in Florida in the South, and we'd go up to Georgia to these festivals, and eventually he started a teenage bluegrass band with some of us. So, I'd always been around a lot of these string instruments, and so right away I just I think it's very common in traditional music in general for young people to play all of them a little bit, and maybe you have one that you're more focused on. But yeah, grew up with guitar, took mandolin, then banjo, then fiddle, dobro, played bass in the first bluegrass band early on. So, they're all strings. You got to pluck them and fret them. And well, the fiddle, is doesn't have any frets, so that was a bit of a challenge.
And the mandocello, is that how you say that? Mandocello?
Yeah, so I've got the whole family of mandolins. When I say mandolin, I've got a mandola here, which is tuned like a viola. Mandolin is tuned like a violin, E,
Right.
A, D, G. And if you take off that high E and you start with the A, D, G, and put a C down below it, that's your mandola, tuned just like a viola.
Wow.
And then the mandocello is an octave below that, tuned just like a cello,
Hmm.
starting with that A, D, C.
Okay.
That
Wow.
C is below the E on a guitar. It's way down. This idea of the mandolin family of instruments, there were mandolin orchestras, of course, in the teens all over America and all over the world. In fact, there's still a lot in Germany and Italy. There's a few. And Japan, of course, has a classical mandolin tradition.
Yeah.
So I'm just in love with the sound of the mandolin and all the family of instruments.
Well, that's great. Me too. I mean, I've just fallen in love with this thing. I have a bunch of guitars upstairs in our little room up there, and my wife says, "Why don't you sell them? You don't play them anymore." It's like,
Oh,
sell them. It's like selling
that's
your
funny.
children, right? Yeah.
That's great. Well, I've sort of come back now, oddly enough, in the last year, after spending a lot of time on the Mandocello. That was sort of my COVID project, was to record all of the Bach cello suites,
Oh, okay.
which I did. They're on my Bandcamp page. I haven't printed a physical CD yet, but you can
Okay.
hear them there on
All right.
Bandcamp. That was quite a project to adapt that music to the Mandocello from the cello.
Hmm.
But more recently, I've been playing a lot of guitar and fiddle and banjo and singing, actually, going back to my roots and doing a lot of bluegrass stuff and
Okay.
John Hartford and Norman Blake and Tony Rice things and all of that. So I've been actually revisiting some of those other instruments more
All right.
recently.
Well, that's cool. And yeah, I know a lot of my viewers are, rock and pop fans, obviously, and
Sure,
again, kind of new to mandolin, coming over from guitar or just beginners. Maybe
sure.
different from some of the other bluegrass channels where people are more advanced at mandolin. But
Yeah.
I'm wondering what would be advice for somebody who's trying to switch from guitar to mandolin? I mean, just turn your guitar upside down? Is that, like,
Yeah, I know it's tuned exactly opposite E, A, D, G. If you start
yeah,
from the low string of a guitar, those are the same notes. And some guitarists think of it that way, but I never did. I
okay,
always thought of the mandolin as its own thing. I mean, the cool thing about the mandolin is that it's tuned symmetrically. So when you play a shape, like a G chord, and you move it over to the next pair of strings, it becomes a C chord. And if you move it over to the bottom, it's an F chord. So
right,
just that simple idea of a two-finger chord moving. Now the guitar doesn't do that.
yeah,
You have to readjust because of that darn third string. It's not
yeah,
tuned in fourths all the way across,
right,
you know.
yeah,
So the shapes alter. I like to say, well, on the guitar, you have to know what string you're on, but a mandolin, you don't. You
right,
know, if you
yeah,
play something on one string, you can move it over to the other string and it fingers the same way,
cool.
which is really cool. That's probably the neatest thing about the mandolin. And so these shapes are, once you learn a couple of first position chords, you immediately figure out how to bar them up and wham, you're rocking. Like, I mean, not to turn this into a lesson, but
No,
if
go ahead.
first chord we learn is a G chord, third fret on the high string, second fret on the second string, open on the bottom. Well, you just bar the second fret and bring that up 2 frets, the fourth fret and fifth fret on top. That's an A. So wherever you put this low string note, if you put it on the B note down here, make the same shape, it's a B chord. Move it to the fifth fret, it's a C note. That's a C chord. Easy to turn it into a minor by flatting the second string. Wham, you're rocking right away. You've got these simple shapes that you can just move all around and rock out.
Right. So learn those shapes at first and get
Yeah,
your
I
fingers
think
down on those
it's
shapes.
yeah, learn those shapes, and I've got a whole system of teaching, on the Artist Works site, and I mean I've been teaching since I was like 17 years old, so it was always a part of my life, even though I've toured and made a lot of CDs and played with all kinds of folks, but I always had a one hand in the teaching side, and then as I got older, and this video exchange system that Artist Works came up with is so brilliant because then it's kept me in the game as a teacher. So I
Cool.
love explaining things, and the cool thing about Artist Works is that a student makes a video of themselves playing, maybe along with one of the rhythm tracks I've created. And then
Yeah.
they send that to me to a secret website. And then I make a video back and respond to that with things I think they could do better. It can be a really short lesson. You know, the student might play for 2 or 5 minutes, and then my response might be 10 or 15. But then they can watch it many times, and anyone who's signed up to the site can watch it as well. So it's been a great way for me to hone my teaching skills and to see a lot of students. I mean, I've got so many hundreds of students. I've actually recorded thousands of these video exchanges because I've been doing it for like 12 years or something.
Okay.
So, you know, you begin to see a lot of the same problems that people have struggling with the instrument. It's so small. How do I hold this thing? All those issues that, you know, how do I do a tremolo nicely? Pick direction when I'm playing a fiddle tune or something syncopated. You see it all. And so I think I'm pretty good at zeroing in on what a student needs at that moment.
Yeah, it looks like you've got all these different categories and styles of music. There's even jazz and pop on there, right? There's some pop
Yeah,
tunes.
yeah. I mean, of
So,
course, it started as a bluegrass site. The main curriculum is primarily bluegrass. But from the beginning of these video exchanges, I started getting everything. People would send me all kinds of stuff that they were working on,
mhm,
whether it was, I got a guy who only sent me Beatles tunes, you know, like solo mandolin versions of Beatles songs
yeah,
uh, and pop stuff and jazz and Brazilian Shorro and Italian music, classical music. So in some cases, I'd have to actually go and study the piece myself in order to be able to really help the student understand it. And it was great for me, you know, to have music, new music, Irish tune that I maybe never played before and things like that. So yeah, now the site is very broad. You know, you can do a search for any song you're wondering, gee, did anyone ever send in that REM tune or that Beatles tune or something by James Taylor or what have you?
okay.
And sure enough, you'll probably find that I've touched on almost everything.
Over 12
So
years, yeah.
it's a really cool system, and then there's a friendly bunch of students within the site, and there's like a little chat area where people are always talking to each other on the front page. And then when a student sends something, there's an area below that where other students can cheer them on and say, hey, that was great, I really thought you did good, you're getting better, you know. So it's
So
an
it's like a little,
encouraging group.
like a community, little community there or something.
Yeah,
Mandolin,
no, we've
yeah,
really created a community in that way, in this cyber way. And it's cool because when I go out and play gigs, then I meet students, you know, that I've seen
yeah.
online, and I'm like, you look familiar. How do I know you? Sure enough, there's somebody who's on my website. I've done a video exchange with them.
Well, that's
So,
cool.
you know,
Yeah, well, that's something definitely to check out. But let's go back a bit to your beginnings there, Mike. When you said you're from Florida, but you ended up heading west, right? When you were still a teenager, you went to California in your
that's right.
teens.
Well, I was a big fan of the David Grisman Quintet, and Tony Rice, you know, had just moved out there and joined the band, and they
Okay.
had put out their first record. I was already a fan of his from his work with J.D. Crowe and his solo recordings. And you know, when David Grisman, I know you've had him on your site,
Yeah.
when he put out that first record that just kind of blew the top of the head off of all of us who were
Hmm.
interested in these instruments, you know, especially if you were young and adventurous and interested in what else could happen with these instruments besides traditional music. David, you know, pointed the way for a whole generation. And
Sure.
so I've learned all that music off the record, you know, slowing it down from 33 LP to 16 with the needle and over and over a million times. And I played all
Yeah.
the instruments. So I had been in touch with David because he had this mandolin magazine, the Mandolin World News, and he said, "Hey, if you're ever out this way, come over and we'll pick a tune." So Tony had already told him about me because I had met Tony and when he was coming down south to play with. So I showed up this one week in August and could already play all their music, and I guess it kind of blew their minds, and they said, "Hey, you're in the band," you know. David was in the middle of making a soundtrack to a movie with Stefan Grappelli, the
Oh,
King of the Gypsies movie. And sadly, he actually had real bad tendonitis at the time. And he was about to go to LA and do a lot of the re-recording of some of the music. And he said, "Hey, why don't you come down and play all these difficult rhythm parts that are giving me trouble?"
right.
And so there I was, 19 years old in a studio with Stefan Grappelli and a full 50-piece orchestra with Ray Brown on bass and Tony
Wow.
Rice, and Diz Disley and Daryl Anger and my heroes, all these people I could. It
Yeah.
was like flying. It was like a dream come true for me, to get to play with
Amazing.
these guys.
Well, yeah, just Stefan Grappelli. I mean, talk about a jazz
Oh,
legend. He'd be up there on the top of the heap,
I
right? I
mean,
mean,
I had all the Django and Stefan records. I didn't even know that he was still alive. I mean, this was to me he represented the 20s, 30s,
sure, yeah,
gypsy jazz that they recorded then, and
yeah,
to realize that here he was, and then we ended up recording on the Hot Dog record of David's, and then going out and touring all over the states with him and his band and our band, and then touring all over Europe. It was just and to hear the stories he had to tell about life, in the 20s in Paris and Montmartre and
right.
hanging out with all the artists and the musicians of that time, and then the war, Django, and just he embodied the whole 20th century, and and
Yeah.
God, he could play, every night he would just throw these lightning bolts, and here we were, these feisty young guys. He would just bury us every night. It was like, this he had the whole language and
Yeah,
history.
yeah,
He played so effortlessly, um,
right.
and gorgeous melodies and tone.
Well, there's some great videos, as you know, on YouTube of you guys playing, and one of
Oh,
them
yeah.
that really jumped out to me was when you guys played on the Tonight Show with Johnny
Oh,
Carson.
Stephane Grappelli and the David Grisman Quintet. Gentlemen,
I mean, what was that like? Tell us what that was like for you
well,
as a
again,
young guy.
it's like mind blowing, especially for that time and how important that show was.
Yeah,
I mean, it was probably more important to my mom and dad and all my cousins. We grew up watching Johnny Carson.
yeah,
That was in the time when there was only a couple of TV channels, and that was the late night TV show.
right.
Um, so it was mind-boggling to get to do those experiences, play Carnegie Hall and Royal Albert Hall in London, and touring all over Germany and Italy and all that stuff. For a young kid from Florida, that's pretty phenomenal. I feel very lucky to have gotten to have those experiences.
Do you look back on those videos now and laugh because you were so young in those
Yeah,
videos?
you have to laugh. It's like, wow, a lot of hair, Mike. And feisty as hell. And it's funny because you evolve as a player, and I hear some of the things I was playing then, and I think, whoa, I played that. I wouldn't necessarily play that way today. Um, and it's funny because we were studying jazz at that time. I mean, we weren't really coming out of the jazz world. We were coming out of the bluegrass world, and there wasn't a lot of materials available at that time to study
Right.
jazz like there is today.
Yeah.
Um, so we were guessing. We'd have the real book. You remember the real book when it was
Sure.
illegal? It was just this. They called it the fake book, and people Xeroxed it before it became legitimate. And we would look at these chords and go, well, what is that? B minor 7 flat 5. Oh Lordy, what kind of scale do you use on that? So we had a few friends around that would fill us in, but we were coming from this other world, and yet we loved the music, and we
Right.
listened all the time to this stuff, and we
Yeah.
kind of invented our own language in a way.
I guess
Combining,
Jethro Burns would he have been
oh,
an influence for you guys?
not only an influence, but we toured together. Again, he would open the shows for the quintet and we'd go out. So every night we'd hear his incredible jokes, and his timing as a comedian was just off the charts. And then he would play, and not only play, but you'd play a whole show and be there from 3 in the afternoon at a sound check, and then the show would go till 10 or whatever, or 11, and then he'd want to jam till 2 in the morning and drink beer. I mean, he was like old school. You play from the minute you wake up till you go to bed, and partying and
Yeah.
living the life. He was of another era.
All right, here we go. What do you eat it with?
I just watched a thing of him on the Merv Griffin show, or Mike Douglas, one of those afternoon shows.
Right. I've seen that.
Him and
Yeah.
Homer.
Yeah.
I mean, his soloing on that thing.
Take the
And
A train, right? He does take the A train there, I think.
it was A Train. You're right.
Yeah.
And the
Yeah.
big band is swinging their ass, and he's just smiling and chewing his gum and not looking at his mandolin at all. The whole thing was a joke to him. But you
Yeah.
listen to what he's playing, I mean, come on.
Yeah.
And he doesn't even have a strap. He's just holding the
Oh, yeah.
mandolin.
Like
You
that.
know.
And the way he just swung it around with his left hand, put
Oh,
it down.
God.
Yeah.
You
I can't do that.
Another era, man. They were built different, that
Just a
generation.
smoking player too. It's just he's like the Eddie Van Halen of,
Well,
of mandolin. You know what I mean?
But the language, I mean, he understood the jazz language. I
Yeah.
mean, they played all the time. I remember talking to Stephane about that. When he was a teenager in Montmartre in Paris, he said they played 5 gigs a day. I mean, you have to understand this is a time before recorded music. So if you wanted music in a cafe in the morning, you might have a guitar and a fiddle over in the corner. Then the lunchtime gig at noon. Then the afternoon, like little aperitif bar, cafe. And then the dinner gig, and then the dance. I mean, it's like all day, every day. It was just playing and playing and playing. And so you develop the language, you learn the music, you learn hundreds of tunes. You can just play everything. It's fantastic culture.
And I saw in another interview that you actually lived with Tony Rice for a while. Did you? Is that
Yeah,
correct?
when I first joined David's band, so I came out in August, and I stayed and did that recording with Stephane in LA. Only about 2 or 3 weeks, and then I went back to Florida. I was teaching. I had my own little teaching studio at that time with 30 students a week. I really was on my way to, be like a real. I could have probably had a music store down there. I closed it all up, and by October I was back in California. And Tony said, "Yeah, just crash here." He had a little 1-bedroom apartment. Him and his wife slept in the living room on the couch, and I took over the bedroom. Recorded on Tony's record at that time, Acoustics, and Daryl Anger was making his first solo record, also Fiddleistics. And then, like I said, David had tendonitis, so we would go out and play little local gigs with Tony, Daryl, and Todd and myself as a quartet, playing each other's music and
Right.
some jazz tunes. And I mean, that was graduate school for me, to be thrust into that environment with those guys playing at that level, especially, the kind of stuff Tony Rice taught us all about tone and timing and playing together as an ensemble. And it was just real profound education for a young guy. And that was like going to college. And
Right.
we were fired up. We were all writing tunes, together, and trying to push the music. What could these instruments do?
Yeah.
Could they play jazz? Not really, but we could play something of our own that bordered on a kind of folk jazz hybrid. And then, of course, to be in the Bay Area was phenomenal because, growing up in Central Florida at that time, it was very limited in terms of what you were exposed to So to be thrust into the Bay Area where you have all this Latin music, great, bands like coming through there, all the great music you could hear live. I mean, I heard Count Basie Orchestra, saw a double trio gig with McCoy Tyner Trio and Bill Evans Trio. Both David had a huge record collection of world music and classical music, and so there was a lot of time spent listening to music and talking about it. And, so that all funneled into my creativity, I'm sure. You are what you eat, I like to say.
Okay, and then after that, you went off on your own, right? And you were collaborating with others and recording your own stuff. And along the way, you've had, some really landmark albums that have been Grammy nominated, right? Tell us about some of those.
Well, yeah, we left David's group, Daryl and I, and then at that time there was the Windham Hill label was just starting, and Will Ackerman was the head of that company, and he loved the Grisman Quintet stuff, so he asked Daryl and I to make a record of music kind of like that, but that would fit the Windham Hill label, which was kind of the beginning of the California New Age movement in music, which was really inspired by the label ECM out of Germany. Again, a kind of hybrid of world music and jazz and pop. And then we formed a group called the Montreux Band with Michael Manring on bass, Barbara Higbee on piano, Andy Norell on steel drums, and Daryl and myself. So, yeah, some of those records were nominated for Grammys. And then that led to Daryl forming the Turtle Island String Quartet, and I went off and formed the Modern Mandolin Quartet. So we were playing classical music on mandolin family instruments, all of these things, mandocello. So it was the same format as a string quartet. Two mandolins, mandola, mandocello. I've always been interested in lots of different kinds of music. I discovered Brazilian Shorro at that same time and fell in love with that music, went to Brazil and came back with piles of CDs and music books and went down that rabbit hole and still am loving that music and studying it, and just finished recording with a great guitarist, Alessandro Panezzi, of guitar and mandolin duets, a lot of the music of Jacob de Bandolim. So, there was also bubbling up at the same time were scenes in Nashville and New York City of musicians of like-minded, like us. If you think of Sam Bush and Bela Fleck, Edgar Meyer, Jerry Douglas, they were all in Nashville and they were doing similar things. And we've always cross-fertilized with them and made records together and played on each other's records. Edgar and Bela and I put together a record. It was actually Edgar's solo record for Sony Classical, and that was nominated for a Grammy also. It's called Uncommon Ritual. I'm really proud of that one. But I mean, there's probably 40 or 50 recordings out there, so it's hard to know where to stop, talking about this stuff. I'm proud of all of it.
It's great that you don't just pigeonhole yourself into one type of music, that you're willing to be open to just about anything. And what is it about Shorro music that's appealing? I don't know much about it. What is it about that music?
Well,
Rhythms,
it's
bossa nova?
I love the idea that it always had mandolin in it. It predates bossa nova, so it's the early Brazilian jazz, you could call it. And it's complex. It's a real challenge to learn some of these tunes. Um, and the fact that one of the greatest composers in the style, Jacob de Bandolim, was a mandolin player, and so the melodies really fit our instrument. The beauty of music, you float around in this world and as an artist, and when something says, you see something, it's like a bright light coming at you. You just have to go find out what that is.
Right.
So that was me with Shorro. I just fell down the rabbit hole and have not come out since.
And then along the way, you met Katerina, your wife, and
Well,
she's a classical virtuoso, right? So
yeah,
tell us how you guys first met and
Well,
connected?
I knew about the classical mandolin thing in Germany, of course, but I never had been there and really studied it and learned about it. We were doing, and I even knew about her before we met, and the school that she came out of. It's in Wuppertal where we live now, and well, David Grisman and I were doing this camp called the Mandolin Symposium, where we had 10 different mandolin teachers and about 165 mandolin students for a week at UC Santa Cruz down here in the Bay Area. And I had a student who had met Katerina and said, "You really should have Katerina come and teach, you know." And at the time, I was like, I'm not really into that German classical mandolin thing. That's not really my bag, man, you know. So he said, "No, no, no, Katerina, you'll love her. She's great." And he offered to sponsor her and get her flight covered. And I
Good.
said, "Okay, let's have her come over." And it was very funny because he contacted her and he said, "Hey, you know, if you're going to come to the festival, you should really play with Mike, maybe in the concert. You know, it'd be nice if you guys did something together." And of course, she was thinking, "Oh God, I got to play with this bluegrass guy. You know, he probably doesn't even read music. You know, oh Lordy, what's this going to be about?" But she was polite and sent me the easiest music she could find. But when we met, it was like this crazy magical explosion, as love often is, and
Nice.
we just hit it off. And of course, she had just gotten her position as a professor in Cologne at the conservatory, like that year. That
Yeah.
was 2007. And so here we are, madly in love. And I had a 7-year-old daughter. I couldn't leave the Bay Area, and we thought, oh boy, how are we going to do this? And somehow we managed over the long distance love for a while. And then pretty soon, a little more time there, a little more time here. And it's been, what, 17 years? And it's
Wow.
working out. Got 3 CDs together and a couple of youngins, Paulina and Josephina. And they're
Excellent.
12 and 14, and they're playing violin and piano really well.
Wow.
And
That's
the little
incredible.
one, Paulina, is quite the gymnast too. Very serious about that. So, and they tootle around with us. They think this is normal. 2 times a year, coming to America and going to these festivals and shows and whatnot. They're fun.
Yeah, and you mentioned camps. You still do a lot of those camps or
Yeah.
some camps? Yeah.
Well, we now have our own camps called the Mandolin World Retreat.
Okay.
Uh, After the symposium dissolved as a thing, we did it for 12 years. It was a wonderful camp. We decided to do something a little smaller, a little more intimate, more kind of exclusive, and do it in exotic, cool places. So we started with one in Napa Valley, actually Benicia near Napa, and that's wonderful with wine tasting and fine food and all this. And then we have a connection with a great guitarist, Peppino D'Agostino, and his partner is Donna Wapner. And we do one in Sicily now. Uh, we're going there
Nice.
in September, actually. If you want to come along, man.
Love to. I'm on the plane tomorrow. Yeah.
It's
Wait a
pretty
minute.
awesome, I gotta say. It's a little island at the end of Syracuse. There's a little island there called Ortigia. And
Yep.
so next year it looks like we're going to go to Greece. So, we kind of pop this thing around the world and try and create something more than just a mandolin event. It's really something
Wow.
you can bring the spouse, and we always have things for the non-mandolin players to do while we're plucking away at our mandolin. So we also teach at the Swannanoa Gathering over in Asheville, North Carolina. That's a
Okay.
fun one. If you ever get over there, that's the first week of July. We just
Right.
came off of that. And then we do concerts here and there uh, around. We just had a piece written for us by a great violinist composer, Evan Price, and
Mhm.
we premiered it with the San Francisco Chamber Orchestra last February. It's a 4 movement piece for the two of us with full orchestra.
Have you gotten her into bluegrass now? Is she into the other
Oh
styles?
yeah. going to all these camps and hanging out with all these pickers. Yeah, she can play a mean backbeat now, and even sing some harmony on some bluegrass tunes. So
Nice.
yeah, I mean, it's been a great exchange because
Yeah.
I'm kind of dragging her into my world, and she's dragging me into her world. But we also always were interested in, like, she was playing Brazilian music before I met her, and I was playing classical music with the Modern Mandolin Quartet. So we each had a foot in each other's worlds. But what's cool is it's just enabled us to go deeper into those foreign styles. Like she's really helped me understand, you know, if you're playing a Bach piece, how to phrase a line, and what to do with dynamics, and all these subtleties that you just wouldn't, they're not written in the music, you either understand the style or you don't. And the same for her playing bluegrass, I mean, she'll laugh when she's playing a melody on a fiddle tune. Of course, she can read anything, but to get the feel is another deal, right?
Yeah.
She'll curse herself and say, "Damn, I sound like a housewife." I'm like, "No, honey, you're doing it. Shut up. Let's play."
Is that your Lloyd Lore Gibson there that
That
you have on?
most certainly is. Yes,
Oh my
sir.
goodness. Oh my
That's
goodness. We
that's
have
my
to
little
talk about that.
baby. Well, yeah, it's a nice one, and it's been through a lot.
Huh? Like, what model is it? Did you have a model number that Lloyd Lore is signed or whatever?
Yeah,
I don't.
he would sign the labels. There's one label that has his signature and the serial number, and another label.
Wow.
Um, uh, so there's that's a whole story. He was hired by the Gibson company in the late in like 1920
Hmm.
to redesign the mandolins. Before him, they all had oval holes, and the mandolin was kind of losing interest for some people at that time. Swing was coming in, and horns were being made much louder, and the mandolin couldn't really compete with the volume of the wind instruments, and especially big bands and things. A lot of mandolin players were becoming banjo players in the Dixieland era. So they hire Lloyd Lord to, hey, build us redesign us a new mandolin. So he came up with the idea of the F holes and elongated the neck and made it easier to play in the higher registers. A lot of really cool design ideas that have found their way into the most builders who build mandolins these days for bluegrass are trying to capture what this is all about. So yeah, I've done a lot to this one. I've elevated the fingerboard just a tiny bit to get a slightly higher bridge, and I widened the fingerboard. I put strips of ebony so it kind of flares out. Um, that's about it. Took the Verzi out. Yeah, it's had a few dings. It was in near mint condition when I got it.
Like,
Been on
where did you get it from? Did you get it
I
from
got it
somebody?
from Rick Ryman in Denver, Colorado, in I
Okay.
think 1979. We were on tour, first tour with the David Grisman Quintet. Went over to Rick's house. He was a bit of a collector and he knew all the guys, so we went over there after the concert. There it was, and I took it home, man.
Wow. Because there's a lot of stories where people finding, their grandfather had one in the
Yeah,
attic or something, and
right.
it's still in its original case or something
Oh
like that.
God. That's
You
a
know.
scary thought, huh? I once got a phone call from a lady who said, I saw the article on you that you're a mandolin player in town. I've got this mandolin on the wall. It's been in the family for a lot of years. It says Gibson on the top. And I thought, oh Lordy, if I would go in that house and it's a Lloyd Lore, what do I do? Do I just give her 25 bucks and run, or or do I do the honest thing and tell her what it is? Oh, it'd be a difficult. Luckily, I've never had to face that dilemma.
This Chris Steele has one too, right? Is his similar to
Yeah,
yours then, basically?
his and mine are both February 18th,
Wow.
1924. It's a very common date, actually.
Yeah.
It's one of the more preferred dates that he signed a bunch of labels on that date.
You also play other mandolins like Northfield. Let's talk, or
Well,
do
yeah,
you
I worked with
endorse
Northfield
them?
to develop I met Adrian at the Swananoa gathering, and we just hit it off. And we would sit around all night long with his mandolins and this, and just trying to figure out, what could we do? Could we make a better mandolin than that Lloyd lower? That was the goal, Can we, what is it that mandolin does or doesn't do? And how can we get closer and closer? So he and I did a lot of stuff together, talking about design principles and also going in the studio with a bunch of mandolins and experimenting with, listening for the tone. Like one of the things about mandolins is if you're in a room with one and it's loud, you can be fooled into thinking that that's like the best mandolin because it's the loudest mandolin. But when you record it, it might not necessarily have a beautiful tone. It might not have a real balanced tone. It might have certain frequencies that pop out, which is why it might stand out in a big jam, for instance.
Mhm.
So experimenting in the studio was a real eye opener, I think, for Adrian and myself. And I would play the same piece on a bunch of instruments with the mics exactly in the same spot. And then he actually did some analysis using computer technology to study frequencies. And he's got a brilliant engineer working for him, a Japanese fellow named Kosuke in Michigan, who had some brilliant ideas about this 5-bar idea. Instead of standard 2, they're doing a thing where there's a couple of little ones up here and then some other ones here and there, like 3 other smaller braces, which enables them to create a vibrating piece of spruce that's really thin, but then they can tighten it up in certain spots as a way of almost EQing it, certain frequencies.
Wow.
Very sophisticated, cool concept.
Sophisticated technology comes to the mandolin.
Yeah, no, they're really forward thinkers, and they build beautiful instruments and not that expensive. I think that was one of the reasons I loved and wanted to work with them was because, man, now when I go to these Swannanoa gathering, for instance, there must have been 10 or 15 of them there. Everybody's playing them, because God, to buy one of these, forget it, right? I mean, it's off the charts. And then even, some of the single mandolin builders who are brilliant, I mean, it still could be 25 grand or something for some of those beautiful instruments. Don't get me wrong, but here he was putting a lot of mandolin into like the $7,000 to $8,000 price point.
Nice.
And for me, it was like, wow, I really want to work with a company like this because I know them all. I met all the guys who work in China and all the guys who work in Michigan. Marshall, Michigan is where they're based, and their heart's in the right place. They're all players too.
Cool, man. Well, I guess we better, I don't want to take up too much of your time. We've already been on here for almost an hour, so.
Oh, I didn't even talk about the Katarina record we just put out. But we
go ahead. Please talk about it.
Yeah. Katarina and I just released this new thing. It's called Katarina and Mike Marshall and Friends. And it's the first record where we have a bunch of special guests. And really proud of that one. Very cool to have clarinet on one tune, concertina, a couple of different bass players, a viola da gamba on a Baroque piece. And then her and I played a piece for violin and viola written by Mozart. He wrote a violin viola duo that's very famous. And I played the viola part on the mandola. And so be on the lookout for that. It's also on the Bandcamp page, of course.
All right. Thanks very much to Mike Marshall for joining us here on RPM. He certainly has had a great career, which continues, as he mentioned in that interview. So don't hesitate to check out his website, mikemarshall.net, where you can get links to his latest endeavors, and also on his Bandcamp page where you can get access to his music, as he mentioned in the interview. Thanks very much for watching RPM.